My name is Cody Kraus, and on this show, I bring on guests to talk about everything real estate. Let's go.
So hey guys, it's Cody here, and I have Stacey Jones on the show with me today. Stacey and I have known each other now probably about 12 years, 13 years.
13 years, yeah.
Yeah, and so Stacey and I started in real estate in Kingsville about the same time back in 2011. We worked at the same company, then we were at different companies, and now we're back at the same company. And we wanted to have a little bit of a conversation today about the case for home ownership in Canada.
Absolutely.
So just a few high-level things on that. Do Canadians bank on their home value going up to help subsidize their retirement? If we look at what CMHC, which is a Crown corporation that insures a lot of mortgages in Canada, if we look at what they're pushing on the public right now, are they pushing home ownership or are they pushing rentals, and why? And what does the public desire? Do we desire rentals or do we desire to own homes? So you guys know a little bit about me. I'll turn it over to Stacey, have her tell you a little bit about her story, and then we'll get into it. So
Thanks.
who is Stacey Jones?
So me. So I have lived and worked in Kingsville most of my career. I was born and raised in Leamington and then bought my first house in Kingsville back in 1999, when it was affordable. And that's the conversation we're going to be talking about a little bit. So that was, that was 25 years ago, and I've been here ever since, and always wanted to get into real estate and was able to make that happen about 13 years ago. I think I sold my first house when I was in labor with my daughter, who's 13. So that's my story.
So Olivia's the good luck charm.
She's how I gauge my career. But yeah, just with regards to homeownership, I think that's my clientele. I deal with a lot of first-time home buyers and a lot of people moving through the market that way. And that's the dream. You get done school, you get married, you move on. And that's what everybody aspires to, is that home ownership. And single family in our area, and what I do specifically, single family homes is the key for most people.
So you said 25 years ago you bought your first house.
I did,
and
yeah.
You said when it was affordable.
It was $103,000, I think. And it was a nice bi-level over on Cog Hill. It was a decent house.
I'll push on that comment a little bit and say, is there still an opportunity for people to get into the market now affordably? Because obviously you make a lot more money now than you made 25 years ago, and so does the average family.
And interest rates were higher.
Okay, so it made sense for Stacey Jones to buy 25 years ago, but if I'm Cody newlywed, is there still an argument for me to get into home ownership now? And does it really matter what the price is when you get in, or is it more what's it worth?
Is it a down payment issue? I think there's a big down payment issue for young people, especially a lot of people go through school nowadays and have other expenditures that they're looking at with weddings and different things. Perhaps if you have student debt, our down payment for that house was $6,000.
5% down on it, on $102,000.
And I think our deposit was $500 or $1,000. So it might not have felt affordable to us at the time because we didn't really have much money. But $6,000 is a lot different than what's your average down payment right now? $30,000, $40,000?
Yeah, probably. So I have a friend who will say, everybody looks dumb the year they bought their house. In 10 years, everybody looks smart from when they bought their house.
So you should be buying, but how do we break into that market?
Yeah. And so one thing you said was that it was a really nice home that we bought for $102,000. Something I've always said to my young buyers is, look, your first home isn't going to be your forever home. You don't need to buy the home that you grew up in.
We had to fix it up. When I say nice, I meant it was a good, solid home.
Yep.
It was ugly. We had to it, but we knew that we had to buy in. And that's where you're going with that. I say the same thing. Buy something. Even if you're going to rent it out.
Pay the right price for it.
Yeah.
And obviously
but
needs
get in
decent
the market.
bones. Yeah. So Paige and I, we bought our first home when we got married 10 years ago. And it was a rundown cottage that had been vacant for years. It was leaking. We had to replace floor joists, electrical, insulation. We had newspaper for insulation. Literally the siding, the windows, it didn't have air conditioning. We had a fireplace for heat and electric baseboards. We didn't have a forced air system, but we were like,
same.
Hey, we did the math. And as newlyweds, she was still in school. My real estate career was still pretty young. I wasn't making much money yet. So we did the math on what it was going to cost to own a home. And we knew
it made sense
if we could buy at the right price. And so we got at the right price, and then she got a job, and then I started making a little bit more money. And then we were like, oh, hey, we have a little bit of equity in our house now because we fixed it up. we could sell it, carry this equity forward and go to the next one. And so we started climbing the property ladder. So we didn't like buy our forever house right away. And we just sold our last house last week, which was our fourth house since we got married. So I say climb the ladder, and I have a good friend that always says that too. It's like you said, get in.
Yep.
And you might be there for a year, you might be there for 3 years, but it's a way to start snowballing equity. And even if we don't bank on house prices going up, at least we make that monthly payment every month, which you would if you were renting.
Anyway, yeah.
Why not have some of it contribute to equity?
My grandmother, they bought and sold a lot of houses. And I think when they got started, my grandmother, she didn't work. They had 5 kids, and he was a barber when they first got married.
So they made tons of money.
Tons of money. But they bought and sold a lot of houses, and she always told me, buy the best house you can afford. Which I think I've always taken as, you want to make sure that you're making those solid investments. And we've done it too. I think Dave and I are on our 8th or 9th house right now. And we've always made money. We may have hopped around a little bit too much, but we've always been in a money making situation.
You climb the ladder.
But if I hadn't bought that first house when I did, you don't have that equity to make those decisions and keep moving forward. So right now I find a lot of young people, and this is my age showing right now, there's a lot of people out there that they don't want to put in that work. If it has the wrong paint color or they don't like the cupboards, they're out.
Cat pee smell, the cigarette smoke.
But you've got to look past that. We had to rip out flooring. We had electric baseboard heating. Half of it didn't work.
Yeah.
It was a good house, but not. So I think too, especially with rent prices right now, you've really got to look at what's it to you? If you're paying $3,000 a month in rent, can you afford to save up that down payment, or are you going to the bank of mom and dad?
Well, and a lot of young couples, they want to live in the brand new home. They want the Instagram home, things like that. And so you can rent a brand new apartment for $2,500 or a house for $3,000, like you said, but you're probably going to pay at least that in a mortgage payment.
Yeah. So it's a hamster wheel.
Can you live with, shag carpet maybe for a year or two while you start doing those renovations? But I think a lot of people are like, well, hey, on the weekends, I don't want to be cutting grass and pulling out carpet. Yeah. I want to be at the golf course or traveling to Europe, but it depends where your priorities are. And I was pretty lucky, similar to your grandmother's story. I had a high school teacher, and he did our civics and careers classes, which is usually the class where they're like, we can't get anyone to teach it. You don't have a solid subject or enough class load, so go teach this one. And he always told us, he's like, I made way more money buying and selling real estate than I have from teaching. And I was like, okay, I need to hear more about that. And I had another teacher who drove home opportunity cost. And so he always said to us, true. Hey, if you're going to travel and take debt out to go to school and all these things, just keep in mind what the opportunity cost is. So if a trip is going to cost you $1,000 airfare, $500 for food, and $500 for stay, a lot of people would say, well, the trip cost $2,000. And it's like, well, no, if you're missing out on a week of work and you normally make $2,000.
A month in Australia last year.
That's a $4,000 trip.
Yeah.
Right. So the opportunity cost is $2,000 in addition to the actual cost of the trip.
Yeah.
And so an opportunity cost that I want to drive home with the viewers of this show is, if you put off home ownership for the sake of traveling when you're young, and I'm not saying don't travel or anything like that, but maybe do it a little bit less, or go to a provincial park or something rather than Europe every single time. You might be sacrificing your retirement for the trips now, but there's got to be some kind of a balance somewhere. But that's
my question too, is if you are renting for maybe a lifestyle, maybe a low maintenance lifestyle, and you're renting, can you then still save enough money into your retirement or long-term savings to offset that equity that you would have been building in a home? And maybe if the answer is yes, maybe that's great. But I generally think that no, the money that you're putting into your home is what's building people's nest eggs, especially what we've seen in the market over the past few years. A home that might have sold for $250,000, and sure, maybe you paid $100,000 for it years ago. That's now worth maybe $600,000. So did your savings go up that much, the same as the housing market did? Doubtful.
There's some really disciplined people that would say, well, on average, the stock market rises annually more than the real estate market does. So if I can rent and then put X number of dollars aside and put it into the stock market, my retirement will look better than owning a home. And it's like, sure, if you're really disciplined and you actually put that money in.
But why not do both?
Do both. I guess my thing is there's nothing wrong with doing both. But if you're saying mutually one or the other, owning a home is kind of like a forced savings plan.
Absolutely.
Because you have to make that payment every month, where if I get lazy on my investments and I don't make as big of a contribution to my RSP or my TFSA this year, no big deal. But if I don't pay my mortgage, I don't have a place to sleep.
Big deal, yeah.
So it's kind of like a forced savings plan. And back to your grandma, I like your grandma's advice. Buy the best home you can afford. That makes a ton of sense. So I did some management training in December, and the guy running the course, he goes, hey, look, I want you to get all your realtors out to your office, and I want you to get the Jaguar dealership out, the BMW dealership, and the Audi dealership. And I want you to have them bring a whole bunch of nice cars to test drive, and I want you to get your realtors into some heavy leases. And I'm like, I don't like where this is going.
Like, really?
This is what he said. I want you to get them into some heavy lease payments because it's going to put a fire in their belly, and they're going to have to go out and produce in their sales career to make these heavy payments. I'm like, Chris, I don't like this.
No,
like, I'm all for, what if we told them to like go out and buy an investment property that they're kind of on the edge? I don't know if I can afford the down.
It's a terrible investment.
I like the idea of putting a fire in your belly because you don't have a choice but to work hard. And I think that's what we did as young families is we bought a house, and it's like, I don't know how we're going to be able to afford the roof when it has to get done. But once you own a house, you're just like, okay, I got to work now.
Yeah, maybe you eat ramen that week.
And you have a kid, and it's like, okay, I haven't done this before, but we got to do what we got to do here.
It's hard work. Yeah. But it's, I think, generally worth it. And most people want that. And we saw that back in 2021 when the prices went up. All of those entry level homes went up for sale, and everybody started buying up because now that initial investment was money in the bank for them. And I think it's worth it to look at that as an actual long-term investment and stay in the housing market as long as you can.
Okay. So let's say you're a retiree in Canada and you own your home, and your friends, same age as you, doesn't own their home. They did okay with their investments and they got a small pension from work. You're both going to get your, CPP or whatever. How do those two retirements look different if you own your home versus you're renting?
I don't know. What have you invested in? Do you have the same money in your portfolio? Just one isn't based on your home equity?
I'm going to say generally, let's say that they both contributed 10 to 20% of their income over their careers to their retirement. And one opted for renting and more trips and golf, and the other opted for home ownership, but they put about the same in their retirement.
I have friends actually. Okay. So this is maybe a good analogy. We have friends that did this. So Dave and I have moved around quite a lot. We still have mortgages. But with that game plan that we've always moved up the property ladder, if you will. So friends of ours, they bought a really nice, entry-level home back when they first got married, probably 25 years ago, and they stayed there. And they really didn't do any updates for years, but they paid it off.
Well, you don't hear that too often anymore.
7 or 8 years ago, I think they paid it off. And I'm 48, and they're a little bit older than me. So then once that was paid off, they put in a beautiful pool, redid the main floor, house, got its updates and everything, and, paid that off or whatever. And now they are mortgage free in a beautiful home, living their best life, doing what they want to do. Now, that's going against your point though. They did own a home.
Yeah.
So it's hard for me to wrap my head around not owning a home because you have to make housing payments.
Yeah. And so I guess the alternative is I'm renting. And the tough thing about renting is like in 2015, 2016, I had a little house in Kingsville and we were renting it for like $950 a month. We're like, I don't know if I'll get a tenant for this. That house right now, this isn't a long time ago, right?
Probably $1,800
less than
now?
10 years ago, your rent would probably be $2,400 a month right now. So rent has like 3x. So if you had the same landlord the whole time and they only ever increased your rent 2.5%, great. But typically we tailor our lifestyle around what our rent or mortgage payments are. And if I'm the homeowner, I'm in control because if I need to sell the house, I can sell the house. If I'm going to stay, I can stay. If my landlord gets sick and dies and the estate sells the house, I might
Now
have to
what?
re-enter the rental market and go from $900 a month to $2,400 a month. And all of a sudden I don't have
lost
money
control.
to put in my savings. I really like what we just talked about before the show started, which was the house that you live in right now, because it used to be a parsonage for a church.
Yeah. So, the Anglican Church in Kingsville, built their parsonage back in 1887. And all of the ministers, back in the day, it was more, they were traveling through a little bit more. So there was quite a few different people that would go through the house. And it made sense, I think, if you're more of a missionary type of position, you're not paying those fees for housing. But then as we got into the more modern times,
especially if you're moving a lot.
Yeah, they would be moving around a lot to different settlements, essentially, because this was back in the 1800s. But when it got into the, modern times where these ministers would be staying with the congregation for years on end, apparently he finally raised his hand and said, guys, I need to be able to own a home because I have to retire. And he saw the value in...
Most people don't get rich being a pastor, so...
Right. Yeah. So they said, we hear you. And they ended up selling. Now, I don't know if he bought that house or he just moved on, but that house went public back in 2005. And I think we're the third owners now. And he now owns a home, which he saw the value in that. And I mean, the question that you posed about the people at their retirement, if they have been putting the same amount of money in their retirement savings over the years, but one owns a home and one doesn't, who's going to have more money logically?
Well, and what I'm seeing happen right now is a lot of people, they'll take their paid for house, and it might not be a super expensive one, but now they're going and selling the house and then going to the super high end rental, going $2,500 a month.
Whatever.
Big deal. Can I get a discount if I pay a year in advance? They're selling a house for... I'll give a good example. We both know this person mutually. Her mom sold her home last year for mid 500s and decided to rent a really nice condo in town. And I went through all the numbers with her and we kind of looked at it, said the old school thing is I'm throwing away my money if I'm renting. Yeah. And that's true in a sense.
You do have to live somewhere.
Now, if you had a paid for house first, it's a little different. Because right now GIC rates are around 5%. So a lot of retirees with paid for homes are going, well, if I can sell my house for $550, by the time I pay the closing fees, I'm probably left with around $520.
Put into a GIC.
Well, yeah, I'll pay for a year of rent up front. Maybe it's $30,000. If it's $2,500 a month, so I'm left with $490,000, almost $500,000. If I throw that $500 into a GIC at 5%, guaranteed investment by the government of Canada, I'm actually paying for the rent every year just in GIC interest.
Yeah, that's my in-laws do that. When the market was high, they sold their primary and they've been renting and threw their money into savings. But
they had to own the house first.
They did own the house. See, that's the caveat. We always are circling back to, but you already owned a home. You have that freedom. And what if, you and I have both done it over the years. You can leverage those properties against each other to keep buying more property. To me, it's always been a no-brainer. Maybe that's why. Or do something. Help your kids. And that's why I think a lot of the entry-level people coming in are doing is mom and dad are taking the equity out of the primary or whatever to get that down payment in place.
Well, and you guys would have a lot of friends with university-age kids. A lot of parents are paying for their kids' school on their home equity lines, are they not?
Yeah. We've always put money away into RESPs, but when you have a house that you've built equity into, you have so much more freedom.
Yeah. So going back to pastors and parsons, that's been happening a lot for 20, 30, 40 years. Yeah. And it's a pretty basic thing. Could the pastor just put money into investments and retire well? Maybe. But again, the housing is that forced savings plan. Can you keep up with it
though too? Can you match that amount that you would have built up into your equity?
Yeah. And it's a hedge against inflation owning a house, right?
So that's huge.
COVID, we saw home prices in 2021 locally, they went up 34.5% in 1 year. That's not normal, but the cost of living was double digits for each year for the last 3 years, I would say. And so I didn't start earning 10%.
Exactly.
Most people didn't start earning an extra 34% just because housing went up 34%, or they didn't start earning an extra 15% because that's what groceries went up. But if their house went up, at least they had some kind of a hedge against the prices of everything else in the world rising.
Well, and that goes back to when I bought my first house 25 years ago. Yes, I'm in a different position now, but let's say we were in the same jobs we were in back then. Our pay would not have gone up that much to say yes now, because now that house would sell for about 550.
Yeah.
But our incomes would not have gone up to match that. So to buy
5x.
to buy that now at 550 when I bought it for 100 and whatever. Yeah. Like that's the stumbling point right now for people. So even if you can buy some little rental somewhere and maybe you don't live in there right away, but you build in that equity, you get some tenants in there and then pull that equity out to buy your primary. Now we can talk about capital gains if you want.
So I think through our conversation, we're like, okay, well, your retirement can be what you want it to be if you owned your house. So you need to own your house. So what about young people now that are going, dang, 2024 is expensive. This place kind of sucks. There's a lot of people that are just like, well, I'm never going to own a home, and
throw their hands in the air. Yeah.
Our average sale price in our area is like between 550 and 600. I guess can the first time home buyers still get into the market? And my argument is that they can, because first off, you don't need to buy the average home. The average home bath with an attached garage on a 60-foot lot.
Buy what you can afford.
Thanks, Grandma. Yeah. So, and I guess what would that actually look like? So right now you can buy a home with 5% down if you're insured through CMHC. The rates right now around 5%. They're not too bad. So if I go ahead and I found a home that I want to buy and it's not perfect, it's not pretty, but it's say $300,000. What does a first-time home buyer need right now? What do they need to make? What do they need to save? All that kind of stuff to actually buy that $300,000 home.
Well, a lot more than what I had back in the day. So what's you're probably looking at a 15. So a deposit, that's the thing too we forget about. You need like a $5,000 deposit right now. So,
but that counts towards your down payment.
Yeah. So, and then if you're going CMHC, maybe like, are people still, I guess that's still something that you have to look at in most cases.
Yeah. So you'd be $15,000 on the down payment, legal fees, $2,500.
Yeah. You're saving on your land transfer tax.
Land transfer tax you don't have to pay until I think $450.
$4 or $450, yeah.
Somewhere around there. So first-time home buyers don't pay land transfer in Ontario up to a certain amount. So basically we're at, call it 15, 17, 5.
Even
plus
20.
We want a barrier, whether it's appliances or paint or whatever.
So it's not just paint at $300,000 though. That's the thing.
True. Yeah.
But
maybe it is for the first 6 months.
Yeah. Yeah. There was one that, I was in a multiple offer situation for recently, and it sold for over $300,000, and the bedrooms were approximately as big as a stable. And there was 2 of them. It was in rough shape. So yeah, you're buying in, but you have to be okay with knowing that you're just going to work away at that place and like take your time. So
maybe you save up $25,000 and you could still get into entry-level market right now, which is 2 trips to Italy. So it can be done. But then your payments. So when loans were 3.5%, a pretty easy rule of thumb was every $100,000 debt's $500 a month. So we're at 5% now. It might be around $600 a month. So if we had a $300,000 debt to service, your payments are going to be around $1,800 a month.
Cheaper than rent.
Taxes, insurance. You're going to end up being more expensive than rent, but you're
working towards something. And that's the idea. Like, I find too, in Canada, at least in Ontario, we don't go too far, right? We typically stay, I mean, maybe if you went to university somewhere, you might land up there. But generally, like, you know, you see in the States, like, oh, you're moving to Vegas and then you're moving to,
take a job in New Hampshire.
People move around a lot, whereas we like to stay home. We like to build our nest and stay there. So I think that, you know, with everything that the province is doing with pushing all these builds, it's to accommodate the influx in immigration. So, but generally, I think everybody wants to buy a house. So we talked earlier about the rentals being built up. I don't see that being a long-term solution.
So right now, there's a program called the MLI Select program. And if I'm wanting to develop a multifamily property, if it's 5 units or more, and my property meets all the qualifications, I can go to, again, Crown Corporation, CMHC, so insured by the federal government. I can go to them and get a 95.5 loan to value mortgage with a 50-year amortization. So if you see all these new apartment buildings that are being built and you're like, how does it make sense at these interest rates for developers to be building rentals? Yeah. Well, they're not amortizing their loan over 25 years like you and me.
Double.
They're amortizing over 50 years and they're getting better interest rates than us. They're only putting 5% down plus the land. So they have to own the land and then they get 95% on the construction value, how I understand it.
And are these subsidized units at all, or just straight up apartments?
No. So a certain number of them have to be, I think the rule is you have to be 10% below market rates. Okay. If market rates, the average apartment's renting for $2,500, then I rent mine for $2,250, but I have a 50-year loan.
Yeah.
And usually it's a certain percentage of them have to be at.
So why aren't we all doing this?
Well, no, we don't all own the land that we're able to build these things on. And they do have conditions like you have to have a developer with experience as lead on it or invested with you, guaranteeing it.
Okay.
Cause like if they're giving you a loan to build a 200 unit apartment building and you manage it terribly, then they're not going to get paid for their loan either. So there is a lot of qualifications on it. But if like we're in 2024, there's not a lot of new construction being built, period, right now from single family homes and semis and townhomes, which typically is what the Canadian family wants. If you look at what the Canadian government's pushing, they're pushing built for purpose rentals, which are typically apartments and they go up 10, 20 stories.
Yeah.
But I have 4 kids. You have 2 kids and 2 dogs.
You're not doing that. Yeah.
Like, sure, maybe it works when you just get married. We're newlyweds. Everything's great. We're okay living in a 300 square foot box.
Or first Canadians, essentially, right?
Yeah.
So people that are coming.
Canadian dream. We have a couple kids. Now we want a yard. We want the fence.
And that's the thing too. That's why people are coming to Canada. Cause you talk about the Canadian dream. Are people coming here to live in a 10-story, maybe initially you have to, yes, but like at some point when you build your life here, you're not going to want to stay in these units. Now what do we do?
Yeah.
We're saturated.
Yeah. And I mean, even if, maybe I just rent that for a little while. It's cool living in a new apartment downtown, close to all the restaurants and nightlife and stuff, but that gets old. That gets really expensive.
Yeah.
So now what? So now I want to rent a home out in the burbs, and you go out to the suburbs. There's not a lot of homes for rent.
And let's be honest, a lot of these buildings are in a high density area that's way more expensive than our market here. You see some of these going up in Windsor, but generally you're in the GTA area. Try and buy a house in the GTA after you've been renting for that long.
So unless you're going to change your career and where you live. Yeah.
It's tricky.
Yeah. Okay. So we covered, why retirees are in a better position when they own a home.
I think so.
Average Canadian family wants to own a home because they want a little bit of elbow room. I mean, if COVID taught us anything, it helps to own where you live because you can do what you want. Yep. You can still go out in your backyard. You can, you know, they can limit public areas, but they can't limit your space, your house. Yeah. Okay, sure. Maybe the apartment's great for when we're just getting married or when we're finally retiring or downsizing or recently immigrated. Long term, not so much. And there's not a lot of rentals when it comes to that. Mm-hmm. On the investment value, we shouldn't buy homes thinking, okay, they're going to appreciate 10% a year, so it's a good investment. I think you should buy your primary residence just because you want a house to live in. Yeah. If it happens to go up, great. But on that note, I think homes are going to continue appreciating, not because people have a lot more spending money in 2024. Groceries are dang expensive right now, and so is gas and everything else. But if we look at the government wanting to continually push built for purpose rentals, they're not contributing those dollars towards pushing developers to make single family homes. Right. So if you actually look at the inventory ratios, the
inventory is going to go down.
You're growing the inventory of built for purpose rentals, and the demand for them isn't always going to be huge. It might be right now, but the demand for single family homes is always going to be there. But if you look at them as a percentage standpoint, built for purpose is growing. Single family is not growing at the same rate. So there's actually less of them proportionate to the population. So that's why
it'll only get worse.
That's why I think our values are going to continue rising. And again, I don't want to buy that it's going to appreciate, but it's going to just because there's less of them. And I think that's still what Canadians want.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think it's always you can't try and time the market. The market is the timing that you need it to be, and always buy the house when you need to buy it. It's not like I just had a couple do this. He was really trying to time the market with the interest rates and watching, and he thought he knew. And they've spent too much money because by the time they were looking here till a few weeks ago when they bought, prices have gone up. And I don't think he thought that was going to happen, but it did. And here you are, right? So
2015 was the first year homes started selling over $200,000 on average in Essex County. And we were all like, the sky's going to fall. The prices can't stay here. 2017, we're into like the 350s, I think. Fast forward to 2024, where 550s is our average. I had a lot of people that were like, the market's going to crash. It's going to come down. So they went and they sold and they rented, and then it kept going up. And now they're just sitting there going, we can't afford half the house we had 5 years ago. So to your point, don't try and time the market. I think if you have investment properties, by all means, go nuts. Try and time the market with your investment. But at the end of the day, you need a place to live.
Yeah.
And I think providing for your family is always number one. If you want to gamble on timing, do it with your stock portfolio. Right. Not the bulk of it, please, but part of it. But when it comes to your single family, like your residence, your primary residence, like don't gamble on that one.
No, I agree.
It should make up a big part of your retirement. Not all of it, but it's going to.
It will. It absolutely will. Like we look at that as a huge part of our, like my husband has a pension and we have RSPs and everything, but I don't have a pension, and we save, but a big part of our portfolio is the properties that we own.
Yeah.
So.
Awesome.
Bye now.
Well, anyways, thank you for coming on the show today.
Yeah.
This is our conversation about the case for home ownership for Canadians.
Thanks for listening to the show, folks. Please keep in mind that this show is not offering legal, financial, or accounting advice, but rather opinions and experiences in the world of real estate from the host and the guests. If you're enjoying the show, please rate, review, and share with your friends and colleagues. And if you think that there's someone that needs to be on this show, please feel free to connect them with me. Or if there's a topic that should be discussed, feel free to let me know. Thank you so much, and bye for now.